bit of an idea of what this road is all about. The main purposes are moving material supplies from the airport of Webbequay to the McFalds Lake area, whether it's exploration or actual development, providing, and in doing so, providing employment and economic development opportunities to Webbequay community members, but also allowing them to continue to live and enjoy their community and the territory, preserve and enhance their culture as well. And then also, of course, there's the experience and training opportunities offered to youth that will ultimately help encourage them to, further get further education on a post-secondary level. So the project itself, as I mentioned, 107 kilometers long, 2 lanes, 17 kilometers would sit on reserve lands. The actual corridor width would be 35 meters. Some other pieces of information, I think there's about 28 water crossings. Four of them would require bridges. The largest crossing is that of the Winisk Lake, so from the island that the actual settlement of Webbequay sits on. It's about a 200 to 250 meter span, so that would be a very large bridge. So that would be the biggest bridge structure as part of the project. Just a few things I think it's important that we mention about this project. This project is actually led by the First Nation. So the proponent is Webbequay First Nation. And they view themselves as the caretakers and stewards of the lands and waters in their territory. And that role that they currently see themselves in will continue through the course of this project, through construction and operation, and that will offer a lot of opportunities for community members excuse me, to expand their skill set. Excuse me. As part of this as well, wow, I need a drink of water there. Sorry. Knowledge transfer is a big part of this project and subsequent projects moving forward. So the idea is, through the course of doing this environmental assessment and impact assessment, there's knowledge sharing, but this will continue through construction and operations, with the objective being for community members to become full participants and basically taking over responsibility for this road ultimately. So it's something that will occur with time, but both ourselves and whoever the constructors are going to be, that is the objective of them, is to approach this project in that manner with that philosophy. And then the final point to remember that I wanted to mention is that every project has effects. And as you'll see in this presentation, we're going to talk about potential effects. That's part of what we do as part of an environmental assessment and an impact assessment. But a lot of people don't necessarily realize that there's always effects of a project in some form or another. The challenge is to use the best available methods, best practices to mitigate or limit or eliminate those effects. And so that's what we're going to talk about mainly today in the presentation. So the one thing I think it's important to communicate is that if the environmental assessment is approved or the impact assessment is approved, that doesn't mean there are no more protections in place for the environment. In fact, it's just the beginning. So there will be a lot of oversight during the project. There will be an environment committee, as an example, proposed to, that will be composed of community members from Webbequay and perhaps other communities, and they will work hand in hand with the construction teams and the engineers to share their knowledge and protocols to ensure that the project's actually executed in a proper manner. And again, in doing this, there will be knowledge transfer all the way along the way. Key role that community members will be playing, and a number of community members will be playing, because a lot of them will be required, as Indigenous environmental monitors. And these are extremely important jobs during projects of this nature. And those are to ensure that those construction and operations activities follow the plan and follow the commitments that are outlined in the environmental assessment and impact assessment. So we have these things called construction and environmental management plans, within which there are many other plans, and they get very specific. So the environmental monitors become highly trained in the enforcement and implementation of these plans. And I'll get into it in a little bit more detail later on, but it's very strict. A lot of people don't realize how strictly these are followed as well. So in terms of potential project effects, this is one of the objectives of conducting an environmental assessment. These are identified for each what you call valued component. Valued components are, in a simple way, important things to community members and the general public and regulators. They've been identified as things that need to be studied as part of the environmental assessment. So potential project effects are effects that could be caused by the construction or operations of the project. Associated with these effects are what you call pathways, which are the routes followed by the effect as it happens. So for example, if there's a spill, it gets into the water course, there's a pathway of effects from there. It could affect sediment quality, it could affect, impact aquatic habitat. But as an example, if you look at an activity like grading a road, right, where you're smoothing out a road, it's got some potholes in it, you smooth it out, and you're compacting a road, you get a hardening of the surface, you're almost like sealing that soil, so you get less rain able to soak into the ground. Groundwater levels deplete because the water can't infiltrate or go through the soil. So that's one example of a potential project effect. And then there's the word that we hear a lot when it comes to environmental assessments and impact assessments, and that's mitigation. And mitigation is just a fancy word of saying ways of reducing or eliminating project effects. So then there's another word or phrase you're going to come across, which is net effects. And net effects means the effects after you try to limit the effects. So you take the potential project effects and you subtract the mitigation, the efforts to limit those effects, and whatever's left over, those are what you call net effects. So what I wanted to do today is go through an example to help illustrate how this works, because if we were to go through every potential effect of the road, this presentation would take many hours. Our document itself is 3,000 pages, so I don't want to talk for that long, because you don't want to listen to me for that long, believe me. So we're going to take surface water as an example. I just wanted to start off by describing a few activities that people might not be aware of, just so they understand what they are. Dewatering is where you take water from one area and release it in another area. And so if you're building a bridge or putting in a culvert, you need a dry area to work in. So what you do is you typically divert, meaning change the direction of the stream temporarily, move it over a bit, then you pump the water out, and then you also rescue fish and move them over. And that's just so you can get in and do the work to build the bridge, and then you put the river back where it was before, basically. There's another activity called water taking, which is where you use water for project activities. So let's say there's dust on the road, and because we all know gravel roads, dirt roads, when it's dry, dust is created. So they take water from other areas and fill up water trucks, and the water trucks are used to moisten the road and reduce the dust. So that's another term. And then water discharges is water releasing water that you're taking from one area to another. So let's look at those three activities. Possible effects when you do that for dewatering, water taking discharges is you might be moving soil particles that have contaminants associated with them from one place to another. So that's a potential effect. But there are ways of reducing that effect. There's a very strict permitting process that the province oversees involved in that. So you have to follow, you have to do studies in advance on the groundwater, and you have to follow, the conditions of the permit to make sure you're not going to cause damage someplace else, basically. Another activity, vegetation clearing and grubbing. You've all seen this before. Before you can start building the road, you have to clear the vegetation away from the road. This can cause problems. It can cause, as you can imagine, if you take the trees down and remove bushes and other plants, it can affect the way the water flows over the land. It can affect how easily the water goes back in through the soil. It increases the rates of runoff of water because you now have a smooth surface and you've removed vegetation and that can use that water normally. So there's lots of different ways of mitigating or controlling those impacts. You restore the area, so you loosen the soil back up, place in native soils and planting vegetation as well too to restore areas. So that's a big activity, especially at the beginning of the project, to clear the area. Then we get to things like culverts and bridges and the installation of those, like I talked a little bit about before. Those can have effects by releasing soil or sediment into the river more than was there before, because you're stripping away the vegetation where the work area is. But there's a lot of different ways of mitigating that, of controlling those impacts by using those little erosion and sediment control techniques like fences. You see those fences, those black fences with the sediment fences that are staked into the ground, and those are used to catch the sediment so it doesn't just roll right into the water course and impact the water course so that it negatively, so that it's not suitable for the fish habitat. Spills response and storage and handling procedures for things like fuel and oil, so that these are handled properly, stored properly, managed properly. Of course, accidents occur, and we're going to get to that. Doing construction activities during low flow conditions, when there's less water flowing through, is another one. And then doing in-water activities during proper timing windows to avoid impacts on spawning locations and things like that. And again, that's all regulated by government through a pretty strict permitting process. We also have roadway drainage design, potential effects of poorly designed roadways would be water running off directly into water courses, carrying contaminants that come off vehicles. So typically, in a well-designed road, you have swales or ditches along the side of the road, and a lot of them have plantings in them. And the purpose of that is to slow down the water, settle out the sediment as much as possible, take up any contaminants, and localize them there. So that's proper design is really, really critical. And then we have accidental spills and leaks, like I was talking about before. Fuel spills, leaks, they can impact soil and surface water, groundwater, fish and wildlife habitat. But with proper procedures for, again, storing and petroleum and other hazardous products, and having emergency response plans to deal with those situations, then you can generally keep these under control. And typically, I can tell you from experience on actual projects, I've seen, these are a properly enforced and implemented construction and environmental management plan. You'd be amazed at how even just a tiny spill of 10 milliliters of oil, like a small amount of oil, that all has to be dealt with. And so you have to collect that soil and bag it and dispose of it properly. So this, these plans, when they're implemented properly and they have to be implemented properly, are very effective at making sure things are managed properly. The next one is an obvious one, blasting of rock. Potential effects are kind of obvious. They'd be on water wells and other features in the area. There's lots of ways of mitigating this. The main one is to not blast, if possible, by using other techniques like bedrock ripping or standard drilling, hammering, things like that. But again, it's a very regulated activity, blasting, and so it requires a survey in advance and identifying where sensitive features are, and based on that survey, there's conditions identified and associated with the permit being granted that have to be followed. So very heavily regulated activity. Then there's the general construction and operations activities. Potential effects are things like grading and leveling the road. That can produce airborne particulate matter, dust, etc. What else? It can affect air quality. It can land on plants and affect the health of plants. Mitigation methods. I talked about one of them earlier, taking water, using water to wet the roads. There's also chemical dust suppressants, and I know this area has become quite sophisticated. And so there are some that are not as harmful to the environment, but even if they are used, they cannot be used within, I think, 100 meters of a water body. So again, pretty regulated. And then another one, waste disposal. You can imagine we'll have 4 camps, construction camps planned along the route. There's a lot of waste produced, liquid and solid waste. All of this could impact surface water, groundwater, soil, air quality. But again, in this construction and environmental management plan, you have things like a waste management plan to reduce waste, and then things have to go where they're supposed to go. And it's pretty well enforced with that plan. That's what those environmental monitors are for, to basically serve as referees and make sure people follow the rules. The construction companies are following the rules and doing what they're supposed to. And then, of course, domestic wastewater and sewage has to be dealt with properly as well, too. So that's pretty strict. So that leads us to where we are now. And where we are now is that on October 7th of this year, coming very shortly, the review period for the draft environmental assessment report or impact statement will be closed. We had a 30-day period for Indigenous communities that we were consulting with, and then another 30-day period for stakeholders and the public and the general public. So that will close on October 7th, and then we will sift through the likely over 1,000 comments that we get, although we haven't got many comments yet, but we'll probably get a lot of them towards the end. And then we will go through, and as we're required to do, respond to each one of these. So this is a big task. It takes a number of months, and we'll be doing that. And then so what we do is we respond to these, and then we send it back to the regulators, and so Ministry of Environment, MECP, and they go through and look at our responses as well. We will, in the meantime, we'll continue to engage with communities. If communities want us to come and visit their community, I know we'll be going to Webequie to visit their community. But if other communities want us to visit, we're happy to do that. We're open to more feedback about the project. But just so everyone knows, and you see all those binders on the table back there, that is basically the whole report. It's many thousands of pages. It can get quite complicated in spots, but we have put together some different products, different ways of understanding what we've done so that people can follow this better. So we've done the key stuff that's in that report. Those are available online. I think we have some copies here at the sign-in desk as well too. We have learning modules. Our friend Tony over here has put together some a learning tool that's tied to this as well too, to help people work their way through these giant documents so that they can participate in the process and understand it. And if they have more questions, they can come and ask us, and we'll sit down and go through it in more detail. And all that is available on our website, supplyroad.ca. Then in 2026, after we sift through all those comments and respond to all those comments and make whatever changes we need to make to the report, we will do that. And then what we do is we resubmit it to MECP, Ministry of Environment. So that's the final environmental assessment report and impact statement. And when I say that, environmental assessment report is for the province of Ontario. The impact statement is for our friends with the federal government, with the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada. So it's one big document, but it goes to two different review agencies. And then after that, the provincial government, the federal government, review the document in detail and make a decision as to whether to approve or, and typically they approve with conditions, many conditions, or they might send it back to us and say address any certain gaps. So that's decision time, and that will be happening in 2026. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. But we'll be here for a while. We've got another show at 6 o'clock tonight, so hang around if you want. And feel free to ask questions. We'll be here for till at least 8 o'clock tonight. So thank you.